think everybody's coming from lunch, and maybe you guys can introduce yourself a bit further. And
yeah, but I think you did a great introduction. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks you for joining us for this conversation. I hope that the presentations will be short, so we can have a real interaction and conversation with the audience. Originally I'm an architect. I studied actually at METU, Ot Mimarlık. And then I was getting interested in cities. That took me to Delft in the Netherlands, Technical University of Delft, where I did a master's in urban planning. And then while after that developing a PhD research, I got more interested in games. So it's really a kind of a career switch from architecture to urban planning to eventually game development. And I think also when, during the PhD research, the company was formed actually a bit accidentally. It was not meant to become a company or a platform. But I think we have seen during our research how strong games were in engaging, because, I think it probably also part of the conversation here, research by design, design by research. That's also quite let's say, a dominant movement to kind of stress the connection between research and design in the Netherlands. And I think the games are actually adding a third, let's say, vector to that, basically engagement. Because when we as experts start designing or planning or making future plans in isolation without engagement of the bigger audience or other experts or non-experts, that's pretty dangerous, I find, because you need to hear reflections of what the decisions we are making, and in that sense, I think game is really not only a site. Let's say, it's not even discipline, I think, in the sense, but I think it will become. I really believe that in spatial disciplines we see more and more games joining from the, let's say, level of architecture to city planning, to regional planning, and policy making as well. We see more and more games supporting the discipline, let's say. And I think I can, if you like, show the practice itself, because I can talk about it forever.
The practice is very important for this audience, so they know how to access afterwards and how to navigate. And some of the things you think that are very relevant as you've been participating in MARUF for some time. Yeah. So, please.
Web sitesini açabilir miyiz arkadaşlar?
They're opening that. I'm just going to also state our guests have to leave very sharply to get a taxi at 3 o'clock. So we're going to end about 5-10 minutes early so that you have a moment to also have a conversation with them before they run off. Okay.
So as you see, I think basically the games we are organizing are physical interfaces. So it's tabletop, and it contains a lot of data where the data is collected and selected and then visualized, and then different stakeholders are around the table to take that data in their hands. And while data is something pretty abstract or open to interpretation, let's say, the game allows collectively understand and make a story out of the existing data. And it does work for games for policy making or making urban plans or action plans. And I think even lately we are discovering it doesn't even have to be a special setting. It can be also any other, it can be a game for economy or anything else that you actually, as soon as you follow the game principles of either collaborating or competition, or some of these dynamics are implemented. Maybe we can, I wanted to start, basically show how practice evolved over the years. I think Istanbul has been one of the places where we started the practice, and Yapyasha project. Can we, Yapyasha'yı açar mısınız arkadaşlar arka tarafta? It's the website. I cannot control it from here, so I have to ask. Projeyi açabilir miyiz? Tamam. I think it was one of the early projects in 2010, and it was a reaction to Yapsat. You probably know all of that, what that means for Turkish cities. Yapyasha was a reaction to instead of making and selling, we can maybe make and live. So that was containing 3 neighborhoods in the city of Istanbul that was about to be transformed. And the game preparation took quite a long time, from involving Toki on the central level until the local residents in the neighborhoods and NGOs. And if I don't know if you can aşağı inebilir miyiz? If you can scroll down a little bit, you can see where we started. I think it was also, we were such special designers. We were really, the game pieces were blocks, so wooden blocks that you would actually really, in a sort of parametric design rules, you would design the new Istanbul block. Especially the question of earthquake. What if an earthquake, before an earthquake, a transformation would be possible in the city? At that time, we were discussing those questions as well. Can you go all the way down till the end? I have one picture to show, I think. Which is faster? Bir aşağı inebilir miyiz? İyice sona doğru. Bir fotoğraf göstermek istedim. Tamam. Bu ahşap oyun bloklarının olduğu, tamam. This was the first interface when we started. So it was these more abstract wooden blocks which were helping the players to kind of form a number of households that needed to be part of the new city's housing block. I think there was a minimum on green that they had to play, so every player was given a certain amount of green and blocks, etc. So they were kind of designing. Also, I think we were talking about collective ownership. Basically, half of it was by Toki was the other half was by private owners. So how they can collaborate, maybe on a small scale. I think that game helped, not the practice, unfortunately, in Turkey, but it did help the conversations. So we were seeing parties that would even refuse to come in the same room together, using also the power of role play, so using each other, like basically taking each other's roles to have a real conversation. Normally we were seeing in conferences, like if you're from a certain organization, you would avoid the other one, you wouldn't talk, but in this game we really saw real conversations and also topics people were avoiding to talk and they could talk. I think that was like another real practice impact of the game, but like opening a conversation, which is, I think, really basic to urban planning, let's say. Yeah, I think this is where we started. Of course, there were a lot of failures. I think we were thinking, oh, these pieces are too abstract. Maybe we have to make them more user-friendly, etc. So there's also quite a bit of learning. I think over the 10, 13 years we are doing this. Bir sonraki projeye geçebilir miyiz? And I think I will show, yeah, I think in this project you don't see how pieces have been, I think it will come back in another project, but I think this was also from, let's say, more being physically involved with a lot of physical game props to see how we could actually use the power of games, but also debating and interpreting and making stories of data collectively on a game called Affordable Housing Game that was implemented in Dublin, later in Amsterdam and in other Dutch cities. Here you see the Irish Ministry of Housing asking local municipalities coming together around the table so that they can negotiate the policy document that they just published. And they needed their engagement because you can publish as many policy documents as you want. As long as your stakeholders are not really understanding or embracing it, it's another useless PDF. So that's basically that it was. They were, I think, from talking about land prices, like square meter prices of how much land should be, the land accessibility to housing providers, to how much would an affordable housing unit can cost, and the discussions between housing corporations and etc. So you see also calculators, the project developers having by themselves to really, with the policy makers, decide basically what would be a unit cost of affordable housing units. Can we go to the next game? So, bir sonraki proje açabilir miyiz? And I think, well, maybe together with that's website code. Together with affordable housing, one of the things that they have been doing in the last years is instead of just making single tailored games, try and see what a lot of cities face, like the climate issues or affordable housing game as well, to see if we can make a game method that can be implemented locally elsewhere. So the journey started with the city of Amsterdam first, in a neighborhood in Baksterdam, and then it evolved to different neighborhoods. And the idea is that because climate is such a top-down policy, so it has been basically with all nations decided in Paris. And then the nations make their own national goals, and that has to be done, that has to go through all the decision-making levels. Eventually it arrives in a neighborhood and it affects people's lives. The way you cook, the way you heat your home, everything is kind of from the decision in Paris influences how you live. And actually the game was also reacting to that. What does it mean to the lives of people? And then can they actually have a say and have a reaction? And the game is basically, I think, in many different neighborhoods in the Netherlands, but also in Turkey has been implemented. In Gazhane, there has been a version that we implemented also in Kadıköy, in Beyoğlu Senin process. So that has been also part of the, I think that's, I was thinking in Turkey, we never made a game that was part of the official decision making, but that game actually was. Beyoğlu game. It was in the reports when they published the whole, also they have been running a very intensive participation process. You would know better than me. And I think that will bring me to the last game. And I think this is what we hopefully will also see in Turkish cities more and more. And in the, let's say, last 3-4 years in the Netherlands, we are seeing that 10 years ago, when we were trying to explain to policymakers and experts, hey, there's a game you really need to use to fix your plan or like engage your stakeholders. Now, bir sonraki projeyi gösterebilir misin, Kupul projesi? Now that the local governments are, belki video açabilirsiniz, öndeki şeyi tam şey yapabilirsiniz. That the local governments design their game questions, define it, come to us to say, hey, we need a particular game on this question. Can you help us make the game so that it can become part of the official decision making? I think this is something not only as method as a game, but all other co-creation methods have to aspire to, because I don't know how is it in Turkey. In Amsterdam, where I live, I see a lot of parallel worlds. You know, and on one side, there's an endless amount of time and money spent on co-creation processes, while representative democracy is making a lot of choices and, you know, having its course, making real decisions, while these people are thinking they are part of the democracy or making choices and joining all these co-creative sessions, which hardly comes together. And I think there are exceptions. There are moments that actually they meet each other. So let's not be super pessimistic either. It happens, but I think it has to happen more, and it has to happen also. I think for us it has become a criteria. If the game will not support a real decision making, we are not promising anything to our players. Also, we are not designing games anymore for just, you know, just keep people happy or busy, or even asking their time for nothing. That's not fair. So I think that's this is one of the games that we have organized during the pandemic. So you see people are like staying a bit apart from each other, but the government really needed the public consultation so they can think of like it's a couple, it's a panoptic, like historic prison. Which looks for its next destination, and the public has to be part of the process to tell what they expect and what they don't want. They don't want, for example, it to be a commercial casino or anything else. They want housing, but not too much housing. They want public spaces in it, etc. So those are, let's say, from the game feeding the policy documents. Maybe here I can stop. After that we can have a conversation.
I think you touched on some really interesting things. I think I have a few questions just to suggest, maybe respond to, and maybe we, there's a topic that I share your passion about, which is self-organization and self-organizing systems. And I'm curious a little bit what you're saying about the impact of the game, and maybe some of the impact of post-discussions that the game has as well, in then post self-organizing the groups that participate, now that they've had a few new discussions with each other, now that they have transcended some of those roles to have a new imagination, do you find that afterwards they're coming together and having some different conversations because of the experience with the game?
Maybe, can you repeat the question?
Is it shifting, like after they play the game and you get these different stakeholders together that had one relationship going into the game, but the game then puts them in a different relationship because they've played a new role, or they've had a new voice, or they've listened to another perspective. They leave with a new imagination because they've been able to physically have a physicality playing with the props. Do you find that afterwards that they are inclined to organize themselves, or do they go back to more conventional?
Yeah, I think that like one of the things we are implementing, because I think that people have their roles, real roles in the city. You know, even if you're a maybe passive user, you still play a role, like, by just making choices where you live, where you work, etc. These are also choices that influences how the city is organized in a way. So we most of the times don't tell people which role they take anymore. I mean, I think implication was an exception. We really need to use that trick so they can exchange roles to be in the same room together. So, and I think when you play your role, it is good for understanding other people's perspectives, but it's also not so close to an outcome that we consider as a realistic outcome to be feeding real direct decision-making processes. So most of the times they play themselves, and that's already interesting, and that's already really exciting enough, I find. So that's one thing, and when what you're saying is really important, the physicality of the game. So basically all the data collected is translated into physical pieces where it can be held in their hands, and especially in a context, I think in Turkey the same as well, but in a small country like the Netherlands, which was totally densely populated, every square meter is contested. So everybody looks at the same square meter or same kilometer, same area, and has 20 other plans. And they have to be contested with each other. They have to be either building a consensus of what it will happen. And the game really shows that. You don't have to tell, well, you have been in a participation process, and you said you want green as a citizen, which is predictable. I want more green in my neighborhood. Yes, you can want it, but just because you have been in a participation process and you want that does not guarantee that's what it is. And that also gives a bit more comfort to experts to explain what the problems they face, and also kind of confronting the problems they're facing with the citizens. I think that aspect of games I really like, because then you don't have to explain people or tell people or make wrong promises to people. They see it if it's well designed themselves. What are the constraints? I think that's what you're asking, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'd like to come back to as we now listen to a game designer is in the design of the game, it's really exciting for me how you shift the scale. So you really blow it up, and then the viewpoint changes, and that they do have to walk around and even have different perspectives, and that the props enable action. So it's already enacting that. So I think as Ekim and I are not game designers by trade. We are learn by doing actors. We would love to listen to Menno and have him take us on the journey of a game maker's.
Yeah. Fun. Hi. I'm Menno. I'm originally a game designer, and I'm still a game designer. And my focus is primarily on engagement. I did my PhD on motivation, education, and autonomy, because I feel that games can do something really special that movies and books can't. If you take a book, you can either follow suit or put it away. When you watch a movie, you can see the movie, you can think about what the movie tries to tell you, but it goes from one end to the other. In games, you can actually do something. And that's a really empowering feeling. I want to give this empowerment, this sense of empowerment, to every aspect of life. That's why I make social impact games. And I'd like to share my sort of vision on game design with you by playing a game. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you ready? Yes, all right. Here comes. First, we're going to play a really simple game. And this game is an example of how people design games that are utterly bad, right? Here goes. I count to 3, and on 3, everybody stands up. The one who stands up first wins, right? 1, 2, 3. Oh, well done. You were really quick. But I couldn't really, like, there's something happening there and something happening. This is a lot of effort. You can sit down again if you like. All right. Well done. You were good too.
Yeah.
But you were not in my
preview.
I didn't see you. So this takes a lot of effort for me, right? And if I'm ever going to play this game again, nobody will be really engaged anymore, right? It's like, again, right? Kind of boring. What I want is that you are all engaged, all empowered to play your own game. So we're going to play another game. I wanted to turn off the lights, but the cool thing is about your human body is that you have 2 eyes that you can close. And that's also really dark.
Hey,
In this game, we're going to count from 1 till 10. But you're only allowed to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. But this is a really complicated explanation. So I'll try it again.
It will work, but the light thing is a little bit complicated, I heard, because it's connected to the next wall.
I know. We're not doing the lights. Okay.
Welcome
Back.
everybody. You're joining our games.
Yeah, you're joining our
Newcomer.
game. We're going to count to 10. And everybody counts 1 time. So you may say 1, then you may say 2, then you say 3, some say 4. But the thing is, you cannot see each other, so you never know who's counting. If you count twice, so you say 3 and you say 3 at the same time, you start all over again. Got it? All right, close your eyes. And start counting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Again. Oh, that was twice. I heard 2 people saying 5. So start over again with 1.
1, 2, 3, 5.
7.
Oh, again.
1.
Oh. 5.
7, 8, 9.
Whoa! Congratulations.
You managed.
So what I like about this game is that I, as a designer, don't have to do anything. That's good, right? I'm a lazy bastard. But everybody was engaged, right? So everybody was laughing. You played for almost 2 minutes. So that's quite a record. You can be proud of yourself. You're really, really quick in counting. Well done. And what I also like about this is that I don't care. Like if you cheat or whatever you do, you are autonomous as a group and you're related. There are some people not playing, but they're still part of the game. There are people really playing and they're driving it. And there are people cheating sometimes, and they're like, 2. Or sometimes they say 2.5, or they just go from 5 to 7. And as long as the group agrees with that, everybody's fine because we're all playing. And I'm trying to do this with other stuff than, well, basically sitting in a conference room with all you together. I make autonomy supportive games, which means that I try to empower the player to make their own game or play it in the way they would like to play the game. And I think that's what you do too, right? Shall we stand up? I think standing up is easier talking, right?
Okay.
So, you make games and you put basically a whole framework in front of people.
Yeah.
But are you going to tell them what to do?
No, not at all. Yeah. I mean, well, very simply, let's say we don't tell them about their decisions. I think that's also part of the difficulty for decision makers to really take the risk to hire a game. because it's an open-ended game, right?
Right, yeah.
So you can want something as a policymaker, but maybe your game players will come and do something that's unexpected,
Right.
that can hopefully enlighten you. Sometimes it happens. Or totally come up with something that you don't agree with.
Yeah.
And I think that's also part of the good leadership.
Yeah.
To be able to listen. Yeah. Right. To be able to also open up spaces that are maybe different ideas,
True.
but also enrich part of your decision and vision actually for a given area. That's
And
true.
I think that makes
and
the
in
design
that sense, we
center
also don't tell people. But so we kind of give the environment, which is also, by the way, having a lot of say. I mean, as a game designer, you have also a lot of space to manipulate.
Yeah, because
right?
you frame the whole
the
discussion.
data sets you're choosing are already giving a direction.
True.
And it also, I think the way the interactions are designed, that also gives you also responsibility to, how much a person can take space, because we know from participation processes that people who have a big mouth can get more space than the other ones. And I think
Yeah, you just overrule someone when they're explaining some stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
That works. Yeah. So right. So what I think is hard in this design process is to find this balance between steering, gratifying them with rewards and punishments, and also by giving people the room to do something that you didn't expect them to do. And especially for municipalities, I feel, or scientists, because I work a lot with scientists who make scientific games. It's really hard because they want to be really nitty-gritty, they have a really strong goal in mind, and then the players go this direction. It's like, no, cut them back. It's like, no, let's try to explore this one. That's creativity.
Yeah. But I think I know where you're going. Yeah, I think it's eventually it's about power sharing, isn't it?
Sure.
I mean, if you're an expert, if you're a politician, it doesn't matter. I think it's the way we organize our democracies has already assumed a set of powers. As an expert, you have as a professor, you have your space, and then and a game comes and asks you, can you share that space with someone else, please?
Yeah.
Because
and as a designer, you have to, I call it the application of your authorship.
Yeah.
So you're having an authorship about the design of the game, and then the players suddenly make their own stuff. They're going to create something new. And then it's not yours anymore. Yeah. And that's scary.
I think that's the fear. Maybe you probably also see that, right? I mean, in my experience, I think when I feel a little bit of conservatism, it most of the time comes from experts or technocrats.
Definitely. I mean,
do you recognize this?
Absolutely. And I think there's actually a really good question here I'm going to frame also slightly differently. And I find games really interesting because I myself is an introvert, and I'm actually very hesitant to play games or do things very social like that with people I don't know. There's an innate hesitation. And yet I am always, just having played a game next door, amazed at my elation afterwards, because there is something like what we just did that's very fun and very social and very motivating emotionally from it. And I think Gözde asked a really pointed question of the struggle in urban design. When researchers want to work with municipalities for gaming experience with local participants, there is resistance. How can we overcome this obstacle? For example, the municipality does not want to try such innovative approaches and is rather stubborn, or we are rather stubborn to make it happen. How have you overcome that? Because I'm sure you've had quite a few experiences of both pushing and then also being asked. That would be very informative, because...
You mean...
How do we initiate games with municipalities? And when we do approach the municipality, they say, no, we don't need that. Mm-hmm. You know, we have our conventional ideas of participation, or we don't know what's going to come out of it. We can't control. Like workshops, I've been to plenty of participatory workshops where the whole thing was controlled beginning to end on the outcome that was wanted, and it was more of a consensus-making activity than it was.
The message was already clear before the game started.
And we just, so I think, you having a lot of experience with different cultures and different contexts and different games, it would be really, how do you overcome that resistance, or how do you help
I think
the next generation?
Like we learned it also the hard way. We made also in the beginning quite a bit of mistakes in understanding if a process was a real process or a more a fake process. And to be honest, I also found a decision maker in Dalang, in Shenzhen, in China of all places, where you have a local politician who really believes that I need to get the input from the workers, young workers, who actually work 6 days a week. On the 7th day of the week, they came to the game to tell us for an urban redevelopment area what they expect on the plinths on the public space. So also you don't give them the fake idea that hey, here will be coming all the high rises and we ask you what you will think about it. No, we know that you will be the ones who are walking through the streets. Do you want a music shop, or what sort of space do you use? Do you need a quiet space to read your book, or also be aware of like what you were saying, what is the agency and how much you can promise honestly, and how can you actually facilitate that as a leader. And I think for us, understanding also, it has been understanding which politician, which process is real, and to be able to select it, and also making, I think one simple trick, just ask, what do you want to do with the outcome of the game? What are you going to do with it? And if you have a clear written agreement about what will happen with the game outcomes, then you cannot make any mistakes. You know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I think there's one of the other things that I'm also very curious in this democracy, and one of the reasons that I was very motivated on using cards and props and role-playing is my experience in city design decision-making is the loudest is the one that gets heard. And that there's many intelligences that are not heard because they're either softer spoken or they don't want to, argue about it. How have you found using props to invite some of those actors that are often unheard yet have a huge amount to contribute?
Yeah, I think that this happened yesterday. We were in a game yesterday in Izmir. It was also totally in Turkish, and Menno was there. He didn't understand anything. But in the second round, the first round was more getting to know each other and making the positions, and the second round was building session. And he started getting exactly what it was happening. He's like, oh, but they're building the road that way. Isn't that smarter to go through the neighborhood then, because then you can reach? So you all of a sudden see in that case you are a disadvantaged person who actually started joining as soon as it has become physical and visual, right? Then you could also say something. I think that's in that sense, games, I think compared to other methods, gives a little bit of like, just because it's really tangible and it's visible, and even if you don't have the jargon or the terminology or the language, you still can tell, like in what we have seen in South Africa, as an illegal trader in a market who can say, well, I sell my live, like she's selling live chicken, and she says, I would like to live on top of it because they're getting like stolen. This is safer. I mean, this is a very simple principle of urban design, to have your shop downstairs and she doesn't know anything about it, but she can tell what is safe and what is good for her. And she can communicate with the game pieces, with the policymakers, what she actually expects from the new development and how she wants to be part of that in the future.
But I feel this too when we're designing serious games or social impact games, we have to work with a lot of clients and stakeholders involved, right? Mm-hmm. And they all have a sort of idea about what things are and how things should be. And the moment you say like, well, but that's quite an hypothesis you have there, right? Like, where is it based on? And they don't have any good argument there. So, okay, let's test it, right? So in our design for the game, we basically go through every hypothesis people have, and then we test it with the end user or with an expert or someone. And only with that input, we make a next step. And I think in the design process here, it could be the same thing, right?
Yeah, I think testing is also a very strong part of it.
It's a really strong argument, and sometimes you are wrong. So that's the best part.
That's also good. Yeah.
Are there any? I have one question from here. Is there a question from the audience?
The application. I have 3 questions for Dr. Tan. And I wonder how this idea has come up first. What is your inspirations? The second one is, did you observe any differences between the projects conducted in Turkey and other countries? And the last one is, who were the actors in the game project in Gazhane?
Okay, that's okay. I think I start with the first question, and then I will remember one by one. I think the idea of game, we are, like we talked about it, we are originally not game designers, but we invented game dynamics and the idea of games being to be very relevant for urban planning. And I think, as I said, it was more part of a theoretical doctoral research where we were looking more informal settlements and formal settlements and trying to see if they could actually learn from each other. So there are totally top-down planned spaces versus bottom-up design spaces where you actually still can read unspoken rules, for example, that people actually follow. And then trying to see if we can find a method to simulate us if we were to take the principles from informal and formal planning in a let's say laboratory area, in that sense at the Technical University of Delft. So I think that question brought us to Christopher Alexander. You probably know him, and anyone who knows Christopher Alexander here in the audience, he's an ex-mathematician and an architect. And he has written the book Pattern Language, and I think he is regarded as let's say the inventor of let's say with the patterns, how can we share the knowledge that we have been building up with other experts, and I think his idea and his experiments in the book, New Theory of Urban Design, you see he never called it games, but he has organized more improvisation-based design sessions where designers come around the table and come up with an idea, and they have a voting session to see if the idea stays in the game table on the model, yes or no. So he kind of had these interactive sessions, improvisation sessions in design. So we started actually taking from what he was doing, and then realized people start naturally role play, naturally build narratives collectively together, and they kind of try to see if they can impersonate someone when they are doing that experiment. And that, I think that was the clue for us to see, hey, maybe there's more to be found in games. And then from there, it went to Dungeons and Dragons, all the other games that actually helped us build the method that we are building. And the second question was? Turkey and the Netherlands, yeah. I think that also in Turkey, in some of these processes where I think it depends on the process a lot. If for example, participation is given a special space in how a vision is formed or how a feature is made, it doesn't matter if you're in Turkey or in China or in the Netherlands. It's really, you really need a group of people who really believe that, this process, we will take it seriously, we will respect the outcomes, and we will take it to the next step in implementation or in the making of it. So in that sense, yeah, I think that we see more and more Dutch cities are like coming up even with tenders of city games. They define their question and they ask us or other architectural offices to make a game. So that's a practice that's more like accepted and now becoming part of the official decision making. But I'm sure, I think sooner or later we will see also here or in other countries and in other cities games or game-like more interactive methods supporting urban planning. Yeah, I think that's also related to the discussions of direct democracy.
I feel this the same way with my practice. We do a lot of games in different countries and different cultures. And obviously, sometimes you need to change the aesthetics of the game, or you need the tone of instruction needs to be a little bit different. But at its core, we're all humans, and we all like to play, and we all like to be empowered. So, not much that different.
Yeah, I think so too. It's I mean, of course, you can see like if it's I think it's a completely different symposium to see what is the cultural differences in South Africans. They like to talk a lot, or Chinese, they are really polite, but they are super vulgar on the physical space. Like you see, like fighting on the game pieces while they're still smiling and super polite. So you see the cultural differences a lot.
Yeah. But in the end, like the core is the same, right?
Yeah.
In the core, it's all good.
Yeah, and I think the Gasane stakeholders, yeah, you can see we have published a report, and all the stakeholders are, like, it's on the website. I'm sure also in their website as well. Yeah.
Okay, like for both of you, how did you shift from your own practices? You said I'm an architect, and you said I'm a game designer, but like urban planning is a bigger scale, so how did you shift from your own practices to more like an urban planning perspective?
Yeah, I think I got interested like by my professors at METU. So I had really charismatic teachers. I think that really goes down to as basic as that. That got me interested in cities, and I think I got really the intellectual challenge of it to understand, just beyond the physical context of the architecture to really understand the economy and the social aspects of like how the cities are complex, how difficult to understand them, but also how joyful to understand and compare them. And I think that's studying it.
Yeah, I didn't really shift.
You were lucky to start at the right point.
Yeah, well, it's sort of true. I always wanted to be an animator at Disney, and then I discovered that I could make games, and I was like, why should I bother like drawing the same thing all over again, right? But what I did discover is that I do have a really strong narrative in the games that I design. They're always about empowerment, and we have this sort of self-determination theory framework that we use to sort of test if our game's good enough. So we'd like to, if the game makes you feel competent, like you can do this, that's good, right? That's one. Then we want to make them feel autonomous. We want the game to offer various playing styles, make you aware that you're doing it, give you a sort of internal locus of causality. Basically, you're doing it, right? So that's a message. And we want to do it with people you care about, that are of significance to you. And it can be a fictitious character, or there can be an actual character, or an actual person. And lately, with the company that I work a lot for, it's called Games for Health, so we make a lot of games for, I don't know, social problems. Like we try to fight loneliness amongst elderly by making a texting game that they could play with their grandchildren. It was super cute. Nobody liked it though, that's another story. But we added an E to the C, A, and R, making it care, and the E is for empathy. And the cool thing about empathy is that you have to do something else than getting something. All the needs are based on getting competent, getting autonomous, getting related. But now you have to relate to someone else, right? So you have to feel for someone else. And there's a sense of altruism that I think is really strong, and that's also something that we see in your games, that you're like, oh wow, oh, but this is what you feel, this is what you want to do in your city. Mm-hmm. This is, we should figure out how we can do this together, right? And I feel that's a really strong need that's still really underdeveloped, so we're going to do it.
Alexis, you are, is a background architect?
I'm very traditional architect and urban designer by training and practice. I am very interested in two parts of the discussion, one of which is this idea of decision making, and how, one of the questions I'm also surprised that we get is, who wins? Like, this idea that a game has a winner and a loser.
No.
Exactly. But I think what I found exciting is it sounds like you've also been able to transcend it, that you not only get results, but the results are now folded into the policy and decision making. And both of you are working on both very literal public spaces or streets or healthcare issues, but also very abstract issues like climate or water policy or health issues.
Yeah, or diversity.
Yeah, and I think it'd be really interesting for us to understand a little bit that journey of how you've been able to shift to that seriousness, and that the results are not just an activity, but an actual thing that can be folded in. And then how have you, in your game design or your game calibration or your game's evolution, addressed very difficult abstract concepts that can be grasped within the props or in the prompts or within the behaviors?
Can I ask?
Yeah, I think it's basically finding the right question, right? The game question, like what are we? I think we learned pretty quickly that actually you need to know when you're designing the game what will be the outcome of the game. What do you like? Do you want an outcome that says, well, this is a planned scenario, or do you want an outcome that says, well, let's see if each other's positions, and do we understand each other? Can we, reach a consensus? There's a completely two different games, right? So I think know what sort of game you're designing, and then start designing the props and the rule sets around it, so that the desired outcomes really come once the players go through the game rounds. So if we are making it, lately we are making a game for Almere Haven, it's a kind of a satellite town of Amsterdam. It's a kind of a village, you can say it in Turkish, scales of 50,000 people. And there's a regeneration project, and the government wants to add 2,500 new homes. And that is a heavy process for the Dutch context. Like, that's taking for 1.5 years now, and the game will make basically 3 different scenarios that the politics can choose from. They will say, well, hey, we have played with so many people, and then they ended up with this scenario, and this scenario, and this scenario costs so much. And then, so I think to be able to come to that game, you have to have 2,500 homes circulating in the game among different teams to see where they would like to build, for example. I'm just like, they basically did know what your question is, and then break it down into game rounds or teams or props, so that you can make sure that the outcome is what you want.
Yeah, I think my approach is a bit different, though.
Yeah.
Like, if you play, you do stuff, right? These are 2 bottles. I just put them on the ground, and now I'm playing with them. So I'm using their physicality and their position as a means to change. Play is by definition change. So what you do when you have this concept, this abstract idea, or this really like this moonshot, you try to find the things that you can reach for, that you can make physical. That's what you do with the big things. And
game boards.
Yeah, with the game boards. You make it physical. You make it being able to touch and to rearrange, to restructure the existing structures to create something new. And that's the basic value for me for games. So when I try to make a game, I always search for what can I restructure and what is fixed. And then I focus on what I can change. And that will be the game. Because that's fun, and the things that you cannot change, that's just a framework. That's what we are by
game constraints.
Yeah, those are the constraints. But and then when you find the things you can restructure, you try to help the people to understand that they can do this, right? So that's the competence again, and then that they can do this, but also can do this, and that both are good, right? That's autonomy, and then we do it together. Cheers, and that's relatedness, and then we have a good game.
Beautiful. Any more questions provoked? I think for me, one of the things that could be really nice to conclude our session is over your careers and your journey through this, and journey of working on democracy and inclusion and decisions and policy, maybe something very anecdotal. That you remember that really sticks out as an experience that you had that was really like either an aha moment in designing the game, or even in a like, wow, we really made some amazing breakthrough we didn't think was possible because of this participation. And if there's any really explicit memory that you have that you can speak to, it'd be really nice to kind of conclude there.
I think the first thing that right away comes to my mind is a process We were running with the city of Amsterdam in the southeastern neighborhood of the city. And the city and the housing corporation was interested because there's a big housing crisis in Europe, same as in Amsterdam. So the government looks at the elderly who are really living relatively in larger homes, and they think, oh, if we can move them to a senior home, if we build a special housing project for them, we can get those houses and give them to families. So that's kind of this organizing this stream. So we went together, so they hired the game, so like we are playing only with the elderly in these sessions. And then in the first session, the outcome was that nobody literally wants to move to a senior home, right? Nobody dreams that actually, right?
Well,
you only end up there if you have no other choice. So we were like, maybe we are asking the wrong question here. So, and I think the feedback to the municipality was, and also elderly was clearly saying we are interested in living multi-generational homes. We want to be able to see children. We want to have interaction with young people. We want a different living than the standard container concept of senior housing. So that really changed first the question and the game itself. And went back to the community again in a different form. And also, I think that was a good aha moment, not for the game only, but also I think decision makers themselves.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time. There are so many aha moments in my work because we always have these sort of iterative circles, and then you think you've done something really good, and then it turns out to be the worst idea you can imagine. I think the worst thing we did was basically the fighting elderly. No, not fighting elderly, fighting loneliness amongst elderly. We started this project in January 2020. So you might know what happened in March 2020. And that was a huge problem for us because we had our whole conceptual phase sort of done to come up with stuff to help elderly connect. And then we couldn't reach the elderly because they were all locked up in their elderly homes. And we couldn't reach the grandchildren because everybody was locked up, right? So we just started designing online in separate groups, and we never were able to bring them all together on one table and design stuff. And I'm still concerned, like we eventually made this sort of WhatsApp-like game, and in the game, in the WhatsApp environment, you play all these kinds of fun, small, friendly texting games together. So there's this one game called Photo Snake. Right? I make a picture of a bottle. Bottle ends with an E, so someone else makes a photo that starts with an E, and then that might be Erin. Ends with an M, so then something with an M, right? And that goes on. Yeah, me. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that goes on and on and on and on. The cool thing is that people share their intimate surroundings with each other, and that people actually talk to one another. Oh, I didn't knew you had that face in the house, or oh, you have a new window. Well, that's a weird thing to say, but still, right? And I played this game for 3 months with 4 senior ladies. They were all 70 years old. I knew everything about them. I knew their dog's name, I knew the medicine they took, I knew the family name members. It was quite something, and I had contact with them every day for like 5 minutes, like really short. And at the 3 months, that game died out. 3 months, right? We were playing the same game for 3 months every day. I thought, this is a huge game, this is a success. Well, they didn't think so. They couldn't care less about the interaction we had. They thought it was just boring, stupid. And they said, well, I felt lonely and now I still feel lonely. Like, I don't know what you did. It's like, what the, right? And I still don't know what we did wrong. So we need to figure that one out. But I think the worst thing we did is not designing with them together.
Yes. So I want to thank our guests.
I'm Menno.
Yes. And it's been such an honor for me because to be able to facilitate this discussion. And I learned a lot. I had never thought about this idea of the question so clearly, but I certainly have taken that away. That framing the problem is much of finding a path forward. And maybe not a solution, but certainly a set of scenarios that make sense for everybody. So thank you, Mara, for this wonderful experience bringing us all together.